President Donald Trump says he will make a decision within the next 2 weeks on the future of U.S. involvement in the war with Iran.
Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks.
This comes at a time when many Americans, some of whom I spoke to at Trump's inauguration, have made it clear they do not want to see the country dragged into another war. But is this part of a psychological strategy to keep the Islamic Republic guessing? Or does it signal deeper divisions within Trump's own party? To help us make sense of what's unfolding, I'm joined by Elliott Abrams, former U.S. Special Representative for Iran during the first Trump administration.
It's a way of giving yourself options until the very last minute. And by the way, he said within 2 weeks. So it could be that he'll make the decision. It could be now. I mean, it could be tonight. And that is exactly what he wants. He wants his adversaries off balance.
Given both his deep expertise on Iran and his personal experience with President Trump, he's uniquely positioned to offer insight into what America's next move might be. I'm Negar Moshahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Elliott Abrams joins us now. Thank you so much for being here on Eye for Iran.
Happy to do it.
Thank you very much. Elliott, first your reaction to Trump's announcement that he's going to be within 2 weeks, he said, where he's going to make some sort of decision on Iran within 2 weeks. What do you make of the tone and of the timing?
First, I think from a military point of view, this should not suggest he's actually decided against it. U.S. forces need those, if not 2 weeks, 10 days. He is moving planes and ships, particularly aircraft carriers and carrier task forces from far away into the Gulf area, the Eastern Mediterranean area. That takes a week or 10 days. So I don't read into this that he's decided not to do anything. Second, I think he is trying to give the regime a chance to negotiate and to show the world I gave them another chance to negotiate. And they wouldn't do it, so I had no choice. He's also waiting, I think, just in case the Israelis can do it. It's not 100% clear that they can't do Fordow. When they killed Nasrallah in Beirut, he was deep down. So what did they do? Well, they bombed the site, and then they bombed the site, and then they bombed the site 80 times, 80. Maybe something like that works in Fordow, and I guess the president wants to be sure it doesn't before he makes this commitment.
So, as his former Iran envoy, would you advise him to do this? What do you make of his decision? Is this a smart thing to do?
I think it is, unless the Israelis can do it. If they can do it, that's fine. We've generally thought over the years that they could not do it. It is a tremendous mistake to leave Fordow intact. There are 3,000 centrifuges there. That's where they would start rebuilding a nuclear weapons program. So if the Israelis say, look, we just can't do it. I mean, we can, fragment it a little bit, but only you can do Fordow, then I think the president should do it because I think we really have to eliminate this nuclear weapons program.
And what are the chances of success for U.S. involvement when it comes to Fordow, and what are some of the risks that come with it?
Well, I think the chances of success are very great in the sense that we believe in these bunker busters. It's not that one of them is magic, but again, you use 2, you use 3, you use 4. Why not? And I think there's pretty good confidence in the military that it will work. And after all, we're dealing with centrifuges. They're not made of concrete. They're very sensitive and delicate. What are the risks here? This is a question of how Iran will react, how the regime will react. Will they try to close off the Strait of Hormuz? Will they attack Saudi Arabia and hope that they can get Mohammed bin Salman to plead with President Trump to end the war? Worst of all, will they attack American ships and bases in the Gulf? I think that's the least likely because I think they're afraid of Trump. And they know that if they do that and they kill, scores, hundreds of Americans, they won't be around to see the news about it.
And you work closely with President Trump. Based on your experience, does he use public, ambiguity as a form of psychological technique that to keep his adversaries like Iran from guessing and not knowing what the next move will be?
Yes. It's a form of negotiation. It's a way of keeping your adversaries off balance. It's a way of giving yourself options until the very last minute. And by the way, he said within 2 weeks. So it could be
now.
That he'll make the decision. It could be now. I mean, it could be tonight. And that is exactly what he wants. He wants his adversaries off balance.
And that's part of Trump's strategy. Did you find that to be the way in his first administration, or give us some insight into his personality that helps form, the strategy that he's picking here?
I think the most important thing to say is that almost exactly 10 years ago, June 2015, he came down the escalator in Trump Tower and said, "I'm running for president. I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to restore our economy." And a third thing, said three things really. What was the third? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. This is nothing new for him. This is not a problem that, came to him in the White House. He knew about it, and he's been determined, I think, to fix it at some point. And he knows that, this is his last term. If he's going to fix it, he's got to fix it essentially now. This is obviously the opportunity. He does listen to different opinions. He's got apparently this kind of inner cabinet with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of CENTCOM, Secretary of State Rubio, Vice President Vance, and the director of CIA. He does listen. For example, on the question of will the bunker busters get it done? Or just exactly what can the Israelis do? Or what have the Israelis done? Or what are the options the Ayatollah has? I mean, he'll listen to he'll listen to information and opinions about all of that.
And I've also heard from folks in D.C., and I don't know if this is true or not, but that Trump often listens to whoever is the last person in his ear, so to speak. Is that accurate?
There's some truth to that. I think it varies with what's the problem? What are we talking about here? And as I said before, this is the Iranian nuclear weapons program. He's had a view on that. I mean, some people would say for 20 years, but it's been public for 10 years, exactly 10 years. So nobody is going to move him off that view.
And how did you navigate as his former Iran envoy in terms of, influencing Trump's decision making?
Well, you have to use the people he is most confident in. In the first term, I would say that was Mike Pompeo, who was CIA director, then Secretary of State. And the best thing to do really to navigate, I think, is people who he trusts, who have access to him, and who he doesn't think are trying to, to maneuver him, to push him one way or another, to get their way, but rather are trying to give him the best information so he can make his decision.
And who is that person now, do you suppose?
Yeah, I mean, there is this group. I think he's paying a lot of attention to these two top generals, General Kane, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and General Kurilla, who's the head of CENTCOM, both, very experienced four-star generals. Kurilla's been there for several years now and, has dealt with the Houthis, has dealt with Iran, has dealt with the Israelis. And he's also apparently paying a lot of attention to John Ratcliffe, who's the director of Central Intelligence, the head of the CIA. Those seem to be really quite influential people.
And what are their views on Iran and in Israel and the Middle East? Just give us a window of what his next moves are going to be.
It's not completely clear. The military guys are very careful. They know they're not supposed to make policy. Kane is very new. So I don't think we really know, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Kurilla's been out there for several years and I think is a pretty tough guy, pretty aggressive guy. And I say that looking at the Houthis because for a long time there were many people in the U.S. government um, under several presidents, but particularly the Biden administration, civilians and military, who didn't want to take on the Houthis. And Kurilla was pretty aggressive, saying, we have to do this. The Navy's purpose is to keep the sea lanes open. So I think we could say he's probably on the more aggressive side. Ratcliffe was a Republican congressman who was pretty hard line. Of course, again, he's been very careful not to say anything publicly. So we're just, we're guessing, and we haven't been in this situation of the last week where we're looking at what the Israelis are doing, have done. We're facing a sort of very discrete question about the bunker busters and about Fordow.
Were you surprised by any of this? Like, did this come as a shock to you where we're at right now, or did you kind of expect this and foresee this coming? What was your reaction?
Following Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister over the years, Iran has been his major concern. I mean, he's been talking about Iran, I don't know, for 20 years.
I was in elementary school, I remember, when he was talking about Iran. I'm not kidding you.
And saying, we have to do it. In 2012, he wanted to do it. And he couldn't get consensus in the military and in the security cabinet. Obviously, this time he got it. What's surprising to me is not that Netanyahu would ultimately decide now's the time. And I think part of it is October 7th, Gaza. That is, all Israelis have reached the conclusion, don't try to psych out your enemies. Look at what weapons they have and assume they will use them if they can. So you've got to take those weapons away. What surprised me really is the amazing Israeli achievements in just a few days. I mean, the way they've knocked off the top officers of the military and the IRGC, killed so many of the nuclear scientists, destroyed Iran's air defenses. I think 5 years ago, if you had suggested, hey, this is what they're going to do in the first 5 days, most military people would have said, oh, come on, not really.
And what does that mean for the future of the Islamic Republic? Would they be able to ever recover from this? Because, I mean, a lot of the people in the political echelons, of course, haven't been touched yet.
Well, I think they can't recover the prestige they had. Israel is a small country, size of New Jersey, 9 or 10 million people. Iran has 90 million people and is, 15 times larger. And it is defeated, essentially, by Israel, by the Zionist entity. And this really, I think, destroys a lot of the prestige of the supreme leader who got him into this mess and doesn't know how to handle it, of the army, the Artesh, of the Revolutionary Guards, of the Ministry of Intelligence. I mean, it looks as if they were all asleep. They were defeated by this tiny country. I don't think they will ever regain that prestige.
And as a result of this prestige, do you think that people are going to start to rise up soon? Because we haven't seen it yet. I mean, we've seen celebrations and whatnot for the strikes taking out certain individuals, but
that's a very, very hard question. And I think if you look at the Soviet example, we didn't predict it. I mean, Ronald Reagan said he thought, this evil empire will fall, but he didn't say it. He left office in January '89. He didn't say it'll fall in 2 years. So I don't think we in the U.S., that is, in the U.S. government, have any ability to predict that kind of thing. It can be the kind of riots that took place in 2009, 2014, the Mahsa Amini riots just 3 years ago. And the question would be, if that happens again, particularly will the army shoot? I mean, that's in a way how the Russian Empire fell in 1917. How the Soviets fell in 1991, how the Shah fell, when the army finally says, we're not shooting civilians. I would not predict that. I mean, I would pray for it. I would hope for it, and I am sure it will happen because we know what the people of Iran want. But the timing, I think, is just impossible to predict.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, so this could be either a really long, slow process, or it could be really quick. But we already saw on Quiche Island that Tumaj Salehi, the dissident rapper, has 30 plainclothes officers just arrested him again, which is surprising in the midst of all of this.
Yeah, I think if you're in the government now, the supreme leader and the circle around him, you're aware of what you and I are talking about. So I think you're going to be particularly brutal and repressive in this period. And there is evidence that they are, in fact, being quite brutal and especially brutal and repressive right now. And then we have to see how the war ends and what compromises the regime is willing to make to bring it to a close. I was looking at the statement that the Ayatollah Khomeini made at the end of the Iran-Iraq war, where he talked, the drink the poison chalice, and he basically said, I would like to die right now. I'd like to be shahada right now. But we have to do this. We have no alternative. They're not there yet. But neither of the Israelis finished. And neither has President Trump finally decided what to do. So when they say something like, we will never surrender, we will never give up the right to enrich. Yeah, give it a week. Let's see.
And what do you make of the relationship now between Israelis and regular, everyday Iranian people? I mean, at the beginning of the strikes, when this was taking out, the heads of IRGC and nuclear scientists, we saw people posting up, celebrations and they were dancing, et cetera, et cetera. Now we haven't seen that. But again, the internet is down, of course. What about this campaign to kind of win the hearts and the minds of just the regular, everyday Iranian people who are against their government?
This is a big discussion among Iranian friends of mine, and I should say Arab friends from surrounding countries. Look, it's quite clear that if you stick your head up now and dissent, it's likely to be cut off. The regime is brutal at all times. And this week it's going to be especially brutal. And as you just said, there is no internet service for most Iranians. So I'm not surprised that people are not, rising up all over the place. Also, there's a lot of bombing. So in many places, including Tehran, people may be afraid to go out much. Look, I think, Iranians wanted freedom in 1979, and they have risen up every 5 or 7 years to demand it again and to protest against this Islamic Republic, which they never wanted, which they have never voted for or chosen. So I don't really think there's much doubt about the views of Iranians. Does any country like to get bombed? No, of course not. And it's inevitable, and we've seen it, that some innocent people die. But I think there are a lot of Iranians now who are wondering, does this bring the collapse of the regime closer? 1 year closer, 5 years closer? If the regime falls in the next few years, I think we'll all look back to this month of June 2025 and say, surely that was a contribution.
And going back to Donald Trump, Jay Sullivan from the Free Press is reporting that since February, Trump has been, mulling an attack on Iran, but publicly he's been signaling diplomacy. What do you make of that discrepancy?
Two things. I think, he really does prefer diplomacy. The regime cannot enrich uranium. And Vice President Vance did a long series of tweets a few days ago explaining to people on the MAGA right why. And, noting, we don't enrich. The United States imports enriched uranium for our nuclear energy reactors. So the formula must be zero enrichment. So the president, I think, is for one thing, giving Iran a chance. He wants to do this peacefully. He wants to bring the Gaza war to an end, the Ukraine war to an end, this war to an end. He wants to give the negotiations a real chance. But the other thing he's doing, I think, is, buying time for himself, looking at his options, seeing what's going on. He's a shrewd negotiator. And I don't think that his conduct in office, has only been since the end of January, suggests at all that he's changed his mind. They cannot have a nuclear weapons program. The regime cannot be trusted. And the question, and look, Trump has said this, pretty straightforwardly, either it ends in a negotiation or it ends the hard way.
So speaking of that, is that why, he gave his 60-day deadline and now he's giving more time again for negotiations? Is it just him buying time, or will, given the Middle Eastern culture, would they not take him seriously?
Everything we're saying tonight can be proved wrong in 12 hours or something. So it's dangerous to ask me that question. But I think the answer on the 2 weeks is getting adequate forces in place, getting all the carrier task forces, getting those B-2s in place, the ones that carry the bunker busters, maybe getting some people out of U.S. embassies in the region, getting people out of harm's way. And then I think going back to Iran a last time and saying, I'm ready. This is your last chance.
What about Khamenei? Do you see him as being, I guess, in some ways suicidal, that if the country is going to go, that if he's going to go down, he's going to take the country down with him? Or do you think he's actually going to step up and go, okay, let's talk, because he wants to preserve his own power? That
is, of course, a critical question. And I don't know, it's kind of a psychiatric question as much as political. But look, the hopeful thing in a way is, who was his mentor and predecessor? Khomeini. And Khomeini, in a situation, obviously not like this in any detail, but in a situation where he was faced with an awful choice. He made the choice, you might say for peace, but I'd say to preserve the regime. And Khamenei has that, and I think we'll soon have that choice. You can have, if you want, the price of trying to retain your nuclear weapons program is the probable collapse of the regime under American attack. So what will he do? Khomeini in that speech in 1988 said, I want to be a shahada, I wish I could, but he wasn't. He didn't. He died about a year later from a series of heart attacks in summer of 1989. So, the message from the past is, if you have no other choice, make a deal, because preserving the regime is more important. And I hope that's his choice, that he doesn't want to, go down with the ship.
And when it comes to the American public, what would they think about U.S. involvement? I was in D.C. for the inauguration, and most of the Trump supporters I spoke to were like, yeah, we love Trump because he's going to end all wars. We're not going to get involved in any wars. And specifically asked them about Iran, and they're like, no, we don't want any wars. Let's just negotiate with them. But then would they see like a surgical strike on Fordow as being a war if there's no boots on the ground? Because there's a difference there too.
Good question. I think what people say, what MAGA people say when they say that, is no more Iraq and Afghanistan. No more hundreds of thousands of Americans being sent to fight overseas for year after year after year, and thousands dying and being wounded very badly. That's what I think they mean. If you look at the polls today, conservatives, Republicans, Trump voters, strong majorities saying they can't have a nuclear weapon. And yes, I would support the president. And, in this fight within the MAGA world, Steve Bannon said a few days ago, the president should not do it. But he then said, if he does it, people are going to get in line and they're going to support him. I do think it turns significantly on what you were just saying. If it lasts month after month after month, people will be very unhappy and will say to Trump, you said you wouldn't do this. I think what the president has in mind is not, the Iraq model. It's the Soleimani model. It's an attack where, it takes place, let's say, at midnight our time. And by the time he announces it, it's over. Last night, I ordered, attacks on Fordow from a bunch of American B-2s. All the B-2s returned. No American was hurt. Fordow is destroyed. It's over. And I think if the military or the CIA or anybody persuaded him, this is going to last 6 months, and you're going to have to put boots on the ground, he wouldn't do it. But I don't see why that would be true in a situation like this. No one's talking for one split second about one American soldier on the ground. We're talking about a bombing.
So would a procedure like that, would that involve congressional support, or could he do that without and then make that announcement the next day, like you said, no boots on the ground and we're done?
Yeah. We do have the War Powers Act, and no president has followed it. I mean, from Barack Obama, Joe Biden, when Obama bombed Libya, he did a kind of after-action report. Most presidents think, Democrats and Republicans, I'm commander-in-chief. The War Powers Act that tries to take away my power as commander-in-chief is unconstitutional. So I will ignore that part of it. The part that says you have to report within, I've forgotten the number of hours, yeah, they all do that. And surely President Trump would do that. But I think, and anyway, remember, he does have a majority in both houses of Congress. But no, I don't. I think he's going to make this decision, and then he'll brief and he'll report, but he's not going to ask permission.
Interesting. And what do you make of folks like Tulsi Gabbard, who said, well, I'm going to quit the Republican Party if Trump attacks Iran? And then you've got, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and those types of folks. Does that show any kind of internal fracture within the Republican Party, or no, they're just fringe within the party itself and have these?
It is. I would argue that it's not really a split in the party. It is a split in the kind of, what should we call it, MAGA movement. If you look at the Senate, there's 53 Republicans. How many support the president on this? I think the number is 52. So that's Trump voters, Republican voters, huge majorities. But yeah, I mean, you've got Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon. And look, the president, it's kind of insulting, but you remember what happened. Tulsi Gabbard reported to Congress that they weren't building a nuclear weapon. And the president was asked about that. And he said, well, I'm not listening. I don't care. Quote, I don't care what she says. Close quote. She ought to have resigned that day. But he's not going to pay any attention to that.
And when it comes to the relationship of Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump, a lot of people speculate that they have this sort of good cop, bad cop persona that they put out there for the public. What do you make of that?
The president, I think it was the president who said the last few days, I have a lot of respect for him. I think he has a lot of respect for me. I think that's right. They're not bosom buddies who are going to go golfing together. I don't think Netanyahu knows how to play golf, but they communicate. They're tough guys. They're guys who rose to the top in really tough democratic political systems. And Trump knows that the only person around who's been pursued by prosecutors the way he has is Netanyahu, and he has stood up to it. So I do think he respects Netanyahu, and he respects this decision to attack the Iranian nuclear program. And likewise, I think that Netanyahu has a lot of respect for how strong President Trump has been on a lot of foreign policy issues. So I think they have a certain degree of respect and confidence in each other. And that's going to serve both countries well in this tough couple of weeks.
And could this possibly change the face of the Middle East? I mean, we're already seeing such a shift with Bashar al-Assad, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the Hamas leader, et cetera, et cetera. Has Israel really changed the face of the Middle East in many ways?
It has changed it partly. Sure. I mean, the end of I shouldn't say the end, the enormous weakening of Hezbollah so that Lebanon can begin to reclaim its sovereignty. The end of the Assad regime, the possibility of a new government in both countries that's pro-Western, not part of the Iranian empire. That's a really important change. But if you think of the Shia militias in Iraq, if you think of the Houthis, Iran still has enormous influence. The huge change, the real change will come with the fall of the Islamic Republic. Already we can see, I think, a weakening from this Israeli attack, a weakening of Russian and Chinese influence. Iran was, if you will, on their side, on that axis, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. And they've learned a lesson. The guys on the American side, the Israelis, have beaten their guys easily. So the region has changed, but it hasn't undergone the earth-shaking change that the end of the Islamic Republic would be.
Wow, that's a very true, a very good point, something to obviously watch out for now. And finally, based on your tenure as Iran envoy during Trump's first administration, what do you see the end game here and what we should obviously be looking out for in the days and the weeks and the months to come?
I really think this is going to end by a negotiation. The question is whether the Iranian regime is smart enough to realize they don't have any good option. They're going to have to give up enrichment, and they do it now. And they're willing to give up the whole nuclear infrastructure soon. The only other way I see it ending is they refuse. And then I do think there'll be continuing Israeli strikes, an American strike if they can't do Fordow, and then a negotiation. As there was a negotiation to end the Iran-Iraq war and a UN Security Council resolution. So they're going to lose this program. They're going to lose this nuclear weapons program, as they should. They should never have started it. And the question is whether, they do it the hard way or the easy way.
Actually, I asked you about your experience with Trump, but I didn't ask you what was your experience like with the Iranians?
Well, we didn't talk to them. We weren't negotiating in that period. So, of course, we never went to Iran. And we did not have the Obama administration. They had Kerry negotiated with Zarif 1 million times. And I think was quite taken in by Zarif. But we did not negotiate with Iran at any point. There were messages passed, of course, and we made continuing efforts. And the president was quite successful in getting American hostages, prisoners, out of Iran. But in terms of this kind of diplomatic negotiation, we didn't have it.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't touched on, Elliott?
I would say one other thing. This really is the president's decision, and it is striking to me that other countries have almost no influence on this. He's not listening to Putin or Xi Jinping about this. When President George W. Bush made the decision about the Iraq War, he listened a lot to the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair. That's not happening right now. This is a small group of people around Donald Trump, and it's President Trump making what's one of the most important decisions of his life.
And why is that? And what are the positives and negatives of that? Because actually, I was just at the G7 in Alberta covering that, and President Trump left early. A lot of people were saying he had to go to the Situation Room to talk about Iran and Israel, but a lot of others were saying, no, actually, the truth is he didn't want to see Zelensky the next day, and he was having some issues with Emmanuel Macron. What do you think? Is there a positive to keeping it tight?
A lot of world leaders like those sessions. He doesn't seem to. He likes them to be short. He doesn't enjoy it. He has people he likes. I mean, as an example, Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. He likes seeing her. And there are such people, foreign leaders, but it's not how he wants to spend his time. And he does, after all, have a really fateful decision to make. He's going to make it. I mean, he'll talk to foreign leaders. He talks to them on the phone every day. But ultimately, it'll be a really small group. And then, I keep saying to foreign officials, we don't have cabinet government. We have a presidential system. The president's commander-in-chief. He will decide.
Thank you so much. That's Elliott Abrams joining us on Eye for
You're
Iran.
welcome.
Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you like this episode, hit the like button. Also, leave us a comment. We'd love to know what you think. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, your go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.